Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate it. And thank you for getting things kicked off so well for us. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so as Jonathan shared, we're turning things over to Dustin Milberg, who is our field CTO. And one of the reasons why I'm so thrilled to have Dustin involved in these conversations is that when you come to InterVision with anything relevant to cloud that you're trying to do, Dustin's going to be engaged. He is one of our key cloud strategy folks that is at the jump of every one of our conversations around cloud. So, if and when you decide to reach out to InterVision, there's a very high likelihood that you'll be having conversations with Dustin, and he brings just a tremendous amount of background, nearly 30 years of experience in, transformational IT leadership. And above all else, honestly, this guy is just extremely passionate about delivering those outcomes for our clients. And I, day in and day out, hear him pushing our teams to deliver better solutions for our customers based specifically on their needs and not our agenda. So Dustin, I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm going to turn things over to you and allow you to get the conversation rolling.
Great, thanks, Chris. And good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're logging in from. Yeah, this is a great conversation. And when we think about quality, cost, and security, it's interesting. We list quality first because it is that customer-centric view. But these are kind of the three, holy trinity points, if you will, relative to what organizations think about relative to moving to the cloud. And oftentimes the things that are either the detractors from completing that journey or the things that ultimately they measure success by. And so over the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. But if you think about how your organization is divvied up to be able to manage the workloads, in particular, and Jonathan hit on this a bit in his presentation, this cloud first strategy enables you, if done properly, to take this dynamic of having the majority of your resources and time and effort focused on running the operation, and which leaves less for grow and even less for transform. And we'd really like to see that be more of a balanced triangle, right? And the cloud offers that. And I often get people saying, well, just give me the easy button for the cloud. And we say, well, sometimes building the easy button is not that easy. But once you get there, it frees up your resources and to be able to put more thought and effort into innovation. The other thing that we see pretty commonly is how the workloads are divided up amongst our customers. And so if you think about SaaS, we think of SaaS as things like Office 365, or maybe you subscribe to Salesforce, or any online hosted application that you subscribe to is your SaaS. Your on-premise is your traditional data center or co-location facility, and then cloud is your public cloud providers, your AWSs, your Azures. And where a lot of organizations find themselves right now is over on this right-hand side. Chris, if you click through here, we see the majority of organizations are located here, and where they want to be is over here on the left. But that migration and that journey tends to be not only very time-consuming and difficult, it can also be expensive if not done right. And that's where we're here to help. Because if you take your resources off of what they're currently doing to go do the cloud migration, right, then who's taking care of that live work and that intimate knowledge? And so at InterVision, our approach is to partner and meet you where you are, provide the resources, the guidance, the consulting to help drive that innovation. And enable your organization to continue to run and grow and transform as you go through this journey. We have a quick polling question. So we'll bring up the next slide, and it's got the question on here. So Chris, I think we're going to activate the poll. And if you can just answer this question, how would you describe the majority of your workloads today? So the things that you manage, are these traditional off-the-shelf, commercial off-the-shelf applications? Are they platforms that your organization engineers internally, or are these native cloud-based services to manage your platforms? Which is the best describer of your environment? We'll give you a minute here or so to go through that. Chris, let me know when we think we've got a good sample size there.
Yeah, we've got a lot of answers coming in. So thank you, everyone, right off the bat for pouring in. I don't think I've ever seen a poll so active right at the jump here. So certainly appreciate it. It looks like it's pretty diverse. So we've got split across traditional commercial is 11%, platforms that the organization has built is around 11, and then native cloud bases is only 3%, which I think is probably not a huge surprise for you, Dustin, based on the conversations you're hearing.
Yeah, yeah, and I expect to see the majority of the balance between A and B, and that is it's interesting, right? So we think about dividing technology into two camps, like traditional IT, that technology your organization has, regardless of the business that you're in, right? Whether you're a little shoe company up here in Beaverton, Oregon, or you are, you're on Wall Street, you need email, you need network, you need Wi-Fi in your buildings, and you need the applications that support that. But the differentiated technology, those platforms that give you a competitive advantage, those are the things that become the lifeblood in how your customers see you. And that's where we're really helping organizations in both of those areas, definitely modernize and get IT to where it needs to be, but also engineering things that scale and give you a competitive advantage. Great, Chris. Well, we'll leave that poll open, but we'll go to the next slide. And what we're really finding that organizations have to figure out is, how do I measure quality? Do I understand how my customers are interacting with my environment? And do I understand the security model? And what does all this cost me, right? One of the biggest advantages of the cloud is once you're in an AWS or an Azure, there's all sorts of other tools that you can use that come with those environments that help you scale out and look at your data more effectively. Analytics tools, AI, ML, and these are things that we can help embed into the way that you're delivering your products and services so that you can have a better and more robust customer quality experience and improve your security while reducing your costs overall. But these are things that, and we're going to come back to this question in a little bit, and to think about, how do you measure these elements in your environment? Fundamentally, next slide, the cloud really changes the way we consume, right? In a traditional data center model, and it's not that long ago, really, 20 years ago is when the virtual infrastructure really started, but that all sits on iron, and we have that iron because we have an application. We have that application because we need the data that application gives us. And we need to protect that data. It's incumbent upon us as good digital citizens to protect our customer data. And we have all sorts of regulation now that puts even more onus on each of us to do that. So what are the policies that govern all of this? And then how do you automate all this workload through to remove manual error, to improve quality, to reduce costs, and to improve the security framework? And so what we're finding is that organizations that take a holistic approach to this, whether it's on premise or in the cloud, are much better positioned to be able to take advantage of those cloud-based offerings as they mature their platforms. So, we don't have rack and stack in the cloud, right? AWS, Azure, they take care of that for us. So instead, we now consume that infrastructure. We consume those data services. We consume the pipelines, but that's all done as code. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that and how you embed those best practices into the way that you consume the cloud. Next slide talks really about, if you've got a stack of rocks, and anybody who's ever gone out to the coast or up in the mountains that's done this before, it can be a very, it's a little bit like Jenga with rocks, right? But there is a balance there. I've hosted a series of roundtables. I'm doing one in a couple of weeks in Indianapolis. So anybody that's out in the Indianapolis area that wants to join us, by all means, reach out to your rep or myself, and we'll get you registered for that. But these are technical conversations about how does your organization balance that cost, quality, and security. And it really comes back to, you have to measure it. You've got to automate it, because if you're not automating it, there's no scientific approach to it, and it introduces more error. But also, do you have the feedback loops to help you improve what you're doing and how you do it? And then finally, who are you partnering with that has that expertise, not just in being able to provide cloud services, but also it has a breadth of experience in looking not just at what you're doing and how you're doing it, but how others have done it, what works, what doesn't work, and what can help your organization get better. And these are key things to think about as you start your cloud journey, or if you're already on it, how you then continue with fidelity. So we think about, again, balancing cost, quality, and security. We're going to look at a couple of outcome-based case studies that we have here on different ways that organizations are using the cloud. The first one comes from one of our credit union customers. And You can't turn on the news any day of the year now and not hear about some sort of security event that takes place. And financial institutions are very strictly beholden to regulation, as well as just needing to be good stewards of data. And so our friends at Land of Lincoln Credit Union, their challenge was that they knew they were going to double in size. And while they had an ITDR plan, it was rough order of magnitude on that plan. It was expensive to maintain. So think about being able to truly have a disaster recovery plan, the ability to fail over to another location in the event of a disaster. If done traditionally, that means you've got another data center with resources that sit idle the majority of the time, and hopefully only are activated when you're going through a test, right? It's the insurance policy you hope to never use. But the great thing about what we were able to architect with them is through our DRaaS as a service, they were able to leverage AWS. We were able to match the outcomes to their recovery time objectives, their recovery point objectives, and build it in the cloud. But we didn't have to have those instances running. So they weren't paying for any resources that were actually working. So as a result, we were able to reduce the cost for them, improve their security footprint, and give them an industry-backed service level agreement with 100% successful failover tests and documentation to help them assure that they were able to meet their compliance standards. So this is kind of one angle where a lot of organizations first dip their toe in the cloud waters. They're not ready to move all of their infrastructure, but a DR plan is a great way. And then as they exercise that DR plan, perhaps that becomes production over time as they look to migrate the rest of their workloads. Another avenue into the cloud. So TaskUs, been a great customer of ours, but when COVID hit and everybody had to kind of shut down their offices, they still needed to be able to service their customers, and it was not acceptable to not be able to respond. So, but they couldn't gather locally, and they needed a low-cost solution to be able to enable their engineers and service reps to be able to support their customers regardless of where they were working from. So they took a little bit different avenue into the cloud. This was about, how do I take what are my current desktop applications, still provide extreme security around them, but give them the ability to access those applications from anywhere, because not everybody that worked for the company had a powerful enough system to be able to leverage their applications. So what we implemented was a workspaces deployment, giving them a great experience from a network perspective by leveraging the AWS Transit Gateway, securing it really robustly with the firewalls. And within 1 week, they basically were back to business as usual, and their customers noticed no difference in the experience here. So this is just another example of, getting things out of the data center that they don't necessarily want to have to maintain, improving the security posture because we get rid of that having to maintain end user devices, and being able to give people the tools to work where they need, whenever they need to. And then another avenue in our final case study here was, we had a born in the cloud travel company. So Couchsurfing, if you've ever taken a look at them, they're a travel platform with members in all over the world, enabling people to book travel resources as they need. But they have highly seasonal travel. And during the COVID pandemic and the start of that, it completely disrupted the way that people travel and experience in book travel. And so they had a massively overburdened team that was working on building out their CI/CD pipeline and tool chain. And as a result, they had cost overruns, and they had another partner in working with them. And so they brought us in to say, hey, are we really doing ourselves a great service here? Do we have the best financial model? Where can we optimize? So they're already in the cloud, but where we were able to help them was immediately identify 10% savings right off the bat by taking workloads that they were running more ephemerally, narrowing those down to reserved instances, and then building a savings plan for them that would ultimately help them realize 33% savings over time. So we're doing a lot of this, balancing, like I said, the quality of the experience, like we did for Land of Lincoln, a much more quality approach to DR, and a quality approach for TaskUs, and being able to provide people the ability to work, securing it across the board, and then also doing it with cost fidelity in mind. So our next slide here, we talk about outcomes and how we help organizations transform. And if we get to the next slide here, our entire approach is really about our cloud lifecycle assurance. And this means that we look at everything soup to nuts. We start with a strategy. It's not step one, get to the cloud, step two, profit. You know, any organization that's tried that approach has ultimately recognized that they end up having to re-engineer a lot of things. So start with a very strategic approach. Think about what is the right migration strategy for your organization, especially with those workloads that are custom, that your organization builds. No two are the same. And so there's not a one size fits all approach to migration, but because of our partnerships with AWS and Azure, we're able to not only help organizations get to the cloud with better fidelity, we're also able to help them offset a tremendous amount of cost and risk by going through our methodology that approaches how we get organizations to the cloud so that then they can ongoing operate with high fidelity and look at how you can continually optimize that environment. So we found that this process is measurably helping organizations avoid migration stall, get there with better security and reduce their costs. And Jonathan talked a lot about meeting the customer where they are. And on our next slide, we really talk about, we've got different models that enable us to meet your needs based on your organization's demand. We have many customers that just look at, hey, I've got a very discrete challenge that I need help with. Can you help me fix this very discrete problem? So we're able to come in, provide the right resources, do the research and the consulting, and deliver products as a holistic approach that we hand over to customers. Some of our customers are looking for a co-managed approach. We come in, we become an embedded part of the organization. We work within your teams, work through your process, and together deliver a successful approach to whether it be migration or optimization or improving security posture or any of the above. Or we've got a fully managed approach. It's our cloud managed service offering. You will learn a lot more about that in David Gaffney's section here in a few minutes. But this enables us to help organizations that don't have the staff or just don't want to be in the ongoing management business. They'd rather direct more of those resources away from run and direct them more towards grow and transform. So we have, and by the way, you can mix and match these models based on what your organization's needs are. Our next slide talks about our key practice areas. Being an AWS Premier partner and a Gold partner with Azure is no joke. We have a lot of work we have to go through. We have to prove ourselves every single year. We have work product that we have to deliver. We have to maintain our credentials. And so we have really put a lot of time, effort, and energy into making sure we have the competencies that enable us to deliver the types of services regardless of which cloud you're working in, to help you balance out that cost, quality, and security. So with that, I'm going to ask another polling question here. So how many of you today are taking an everything is code approach to your engineering workloads? So when we think about engineering, we're thinking about all 6 layers of the platform again, right? So infrastructure, application, data, security, policy, and pipeline. So how many of you are taking an everything is code approach to your engineering workloads, regardless of cloud or on-premise? And I think the poll is up and running there on the right-hand side.
It's running, Dustin. Yeah, we're getting a lot of answers coming in. So it looks like the majority of the audience is thinking about some of their workloads going everything is code. And then it's about split between the rest of either none of their workloads or most of their workloads. So it's kind of distributed, but with the majority of the organizations kind of looking at some of their workloads as everything as a code.
Yeah, and this really maps quite nicely. Jonathan had this slide up earlier about Gartner's research saying that the bottom line is that cloud resources are very hard to come by and they're very expensive. I would even take that a step further. It's more than not just, Gartner's absolutely right, and Jonathan's right in the slide, but it's because of the behavioral change that the cloud imposes on organizations that now we consume through code. Your traditional infrastructure engineers or system engineers now become software developers. And that means changing and retooling. It doesn't mean you don't need those. It means that you now need to change the way they approach the work. And so this creates that dichotomy. I would have expected those numbers to be exactly as they came out. So Um, one of my last few slides here, we talk about meeting you where you are. So we have a lot of customers that are all over the spectrum, right? We have some that are just learning to spell AWS, and then we have some that are very rich and deep in the cloud, transforming and optimizing and really taking advantage of all the benefits that the cloud provides: cost savings, ephemerality, immutability, helping really drive transformation, and then using those feedback loops of analytics and AI and ML to optimize the workloads. But regardless of where you are, we have so many different offerings inside of our Cloud Lifecycle Assurance program that can really meet you wherever you are. Everything from a readiness assessment, organizations that are just dipping their toe in the cloud. Are we ready? What do we need to do to get there, and how can we get there with fidelity? Looking at cost analysis, doing those migration services, everything from rehosting, so lift and shift, or replatforming and refactoring. We talked a little bit about DRES, and Ben's going to talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. I told you a little bit about what we did with Taskus for some digital workspaces. As I mentioned, cloud security is radically different than the traditional approach to security. And looking at those well-architected frameworks and how we can help you through management and cost optimization and CI/CD and platform engineering and data analytics. So we've got a broad offering. Both Dave Gaffney and Ben are going to talk a little bit more about some of these here in a little bit. But hopefully what you've seen is that focusing on the journey really is where we're trying to get organizations to think about it. I've mentioned this before, and any of you that have listened to my podcast know that we call it a journey because it's not that you never arrive. It's sort of like fitness. You don't get fit and then stop, right? You have to continue to work out. You have to continue to eat well. And so focusing on that entire journey and approach will help you in our approach and methodology is to measurably help you look at how we accelerate your velocity, how we increase your security, how we improve your efficiency, and how we make that customer experience better. So with that, I have one more polling question for all of you. And so we'll
Dustin,
bring this one. Yep.
Yeah, I'll pull that one up in just a moment. Actually, Jennifer on our team is plugging away in the background there, but this one's just got a little bit more time before it closes.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
It's the vast majority is really in that some workloads, right? So folks are thinking certainly about everything as code in their approach. With the very few kind of most of their workloads there, and then the rest over in none of their workloads today. But as we're kind of waiting here, one of the things I wanted to touch on, Dustin, that really jumped out at me, we had Taskus on at a previous Cloud Strategy Summit, and Sam there at Taskus, who is the IT leader, he spoke to the fact that because they had embraced a cloud first strategy, they were able to embrace a people first strategy for their employees. And specifically, he spoke to the fact that many of their competitors in the space, they're a help desk provider, had to keep their employees in office in a dangerous situation, during COVID, right? And the fact that they were able to quickly distribute their workforce through the work that we did together with AWS AppStream and Workspaces, they were able to maintain their people first, which is a core part of their mission. And I just thought that was just such a cool example about, again, cloud is just a tool. It's just a means to an end. But when it can empower organizations to kind of stay true to their mission, I thought that was just such a powerful story, and just wanted to highlight that. And the other thing I wanted to say is that, thinking about that entire cloud journey, one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that, as you're thinking about ways that you can get things started potentially with InterVision, is it doesn't always have to be a large scale migration, right? We can come in with a workshop or even just a conversation to get a sense for, what are your goals? What are your strategy? Where are you trying to go? So I just call out that, throughout the day, you'll hear more about some of the ways you can engage with us. But just in terms of that entire maturity spectrum, I know a lot of our smartest people have worked on different ways to engage with our customers, again, no matter where they are. And it doesn't always have to be this mega massive multi-million-dollar migration project, right? Sometimes it's just as simple as designing a strategy and putting some actionable steps in place for our customers to help them move along. So I think
great points. I'd love to just piggyback on the Nazar comment. I did a series of podcasts about 6-8 months ago, on the approach to the successful approach to having a healthy culture in your organization, because ultimately people are at the heart of everything your organization does, right? People are going to define your success or failure as an organization. No matter how good the products are that you deliver, people are still behind it, right? So it's critical that organizations take a people first approach, then process, and then tools. And so that really highlights the fact that that those cultural elements can't be understated. And with that too, I would say it's kind of like organizations that are trying to build out a healthy DevOps culture or DevSecOps culture. That the focus has got to come back to what are my resources? How do I get them to come on this journey with me, right? And it's no different than any other organizational transformation. They've got to understand why it's good for them. And ultimately, the cloud offers so many opportunities for your employees to improve their skills, and as leaders, our job is to give our employees the most marketable resumes in the industry, but create a culture where they never want to leave, right? And ultimately, the cloud offers a lot of that if organizations are willing to kind of harness that. Not to mention the competitive advantage, the improved security, the reduction in costs, if done correctly. So great points.
Absolutely. So we're at our poll. Go ahead, Dustin.
Great, thank you. So we started thinking about this triad of quality, security, and cost. So we want to know from you, if you had to sacrifice, in what order, which of these areas is most important, second most important, third? So do you rank quality first, security first, or cost first? If you were going to sacrifice one thing, the last thing is the thing you would sacrifice, or the first thing is the last thing that you would sacrifice, right? So if quality is most important to you, and then you're willing to risk security and then cost, then choose number one. So let's open this up and see how people rank this. This will be interesting.
Awesome.
We're going to come back to the answers on these, right, later.
Absolutely. I was going to say at the end of the roundtable discussion, we'll revisit all this, but as you could probably expect, there's a clear front runner here, and so we'll talk more about that.